Arsenal's injuries have become a huge problem for Arteta. Kai Havertz now out for the rest of the season. Gabriel Jesus also out until the end of the season. Saka's on his way back, but still a while away. Martinelli's also now out. So the big question is, who's going to play up front? Because they genuinely are down to a situation where they might have to play a player who doesn't want to play as the nine.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. And I actually, when it got to the end of the transfer window and Arsenal was scrambling for a striker, I said, if you're going to bring in somebody, say Ollie Watkins, who they're linked with for 60 mil, who's 29 years old, I said, you might as well wait till the summer. I wasn't factoring in that Kai Havertz was going to tear his hamstrings during warm weather training in Dubai. Like, that's unfortunate. And I know Arsenal fans are bemoaning the fact that they've had a lot of injuries, but last year they avoided injuries and they still didn't win the league. So this is just what happens in football. In terms of who plays down the middle, I think that Mikel Moreno's got a big chance of playing down the middle just because of the style of football. I think if you're to play any of those players who play out wide down the middle for Arsenal, it just changes the composition of the side. It's the reason why I know he's out with an injury, but Gabriel Jesus was shifted from a front man to played out wide because Arteta's got a set way of how he wants to play. He wants his striker to be combative. They want to go long on occasion. And I feel like Mikel Moreno gives them a better chance of doing that as opposed to other players who we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about them not signing a striker. I think we might look back in 5 years and we might look back at the transfer window in summer and the transfer window just gone in January as the sort of death knell for Mikel Arteta. I think this was such a good chance to buy a striker and win a league, which, as we've said many times, will probably win on lower points than in the last 10 years. Win a league where Manchester City can't compete. Win a league where Liverpool are in their first season under a new manager. It was such a good opportunity to buy a striker and try and win one of the trophies. And I don't think they'll be able to now. And my sort of rogue shout would be Sterling in false nine. I know he hasn't scored many goals for quite a long time, but if you remember when Mikel Arteta was at Manchester City, how good Sterling was. He had the second most calendar goals in the whole of Europe, apart from Lionel Messi. And his levels massively dropped when Arteta left, and it's said that they had a really good working relationship. It obviously hasn't materialised into much at the moment, but I think you're looking at a player who has won titles before, who's been there in big moments, big games on the international stage and at club level. And I think if you can find a way to work around him, I think Arsenal could have some success in big games. But I think without Havertz, that's it now.
I think the problem they've got is Sterling hasn't scored a Premier League goal for Arsenal. He hasn't looked fully fit. I think when he joined Arsenal, did he say you'll see like another side of me or something like that? Or you're still going to see the best of me? I don't think that's really materialised. I agree with you because of style of play, that like a clunky, like physical presence in that forward position probably leans towards Mikel Merino. He did play as an auxiliary striker for Spain a couple of times, and I thought he was fine. The other issue they've got is if they play, obviously Trossard would play off the left, can also play through the middle. It'll probably be Wanyeri off the right. So you've got a 17-year-old who we've seen glimpses of, and I think he does look superb. And then Trossard, and then either Merino or Sterling.
It stinks. It stinks. And unfortunately, you're right to point out the summer transfer window because it's all well and good scrambling around in January. We'll bring in this player, we'll try and bring in this player. But like no team that's trying to win a league does their primary business in January. That business is already done in the summer. Like the reason why City done business in January is because you're rebuilding and you're doing it early to steal a march on everybody else. Whereas Arsenal, you bring in Calafiori, good player. But centre back is already a position of strength. I know there's talks about him playing at left back, but I think that's Miles Lewis-Skelly's position right now. You look at the midfield, you brought in Mikel Moreno, you brought in the wrong Sociedad midfielder, ostensibly. You should have gone for Zubimendi, and you bring Raheem Sterling on a loan. That stinks. That doesn't tell you that that's a team that's going to win the league. That's a team that's trying to consolidate their place in the top four. That's why a lot of fans are right to look at KSC, and granted, the Kroenkes have done a decent job over the last couple of seasons in terms of getting this team back to where they should be. But where Arsenal fans think they actually should be is winning league titles, and they're way off of that right now.
I think the one thing I would say is where I agree that Arsenal definitely should have bought a striker. I do think they just haven't planned this squad very well. So they bought Zinchenko, and that was for them to get into the top four. But I think that wasn't the absolute upgrade they needed, because they knew in 2 years when they wanted to win the league, they'd have to upgrade again. Same for Gabriel Jesus. So what they've basically done is, without having all the money in the world, they've bought players to get them just a few places above where they were, and now they're stuck with those players. So you had to spend 35 million on Calafiori. If they had bought Calafiori 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or bought someone else, they would have had that money for a striker, and they fell short for Watkins by, I think, 14 million. Which obviously to Arsenal fans, they're like, oh my God. But if a club has a structure of how they want to spend money, my football club Liverpool have missed out on tons of players by 3 million, 4 million, and fans can't comprehend that. But that is, if a club wants to function in that manner, there is a reason for it. And I think they just haven't squad built very well. And now they've ended up in a scenario where they were desperate for Watkins. And that would have hindered them longer term again.
But it kind of makes me wonder what the process is, what the, you know, they say trust the process, but what is the process under Arteta? Is it that it is taking a lot longer than he thought, or is this his natural timescale and the fans have got way ahead of themselves and they shouldn't have been competing in the last 2 years? Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe Arsenal should never have been competing for titles this early on in Arteta's reign. Maybe that's what's happening, because you are right, the transfers have never been of a Premier League winning standard or a Champions League winning standard. They shouldn't be scrambling around in January for a 29-year-old Ollie Watkins. That shouldn't be happening if you want to win the league. We know that Arne Slot came in, didn't buy anyone, but he had Jurgen Klopp's Champions League and Premier League winning Spartan. Arteta had nothing really when he came in at Arsenal, and I think he's done a great job to get them where they are, but I think the last few transfer windows have massively let them down, and that's why they found themselves in a position like this, because we're talking about this now because Kai Havertz is injured, not because Ronaldo is injured or not because Isak is injured, because Kai Havertz, a basically centre attacking midfielder who wasn't good enough for Chelsea, is injured. Now that's not good enough for a team who want to win the title.
The one thing I would say is, yes, maybe in terms of the process, this maybe wasn't planned, but we all said at the start of this season, this is Arsenal's title. So the fact that they're falling short in this scenario, I think now makes everything look a lot worse.
100%. And we're talking, this is obviously a chat about striker and who'll play up front for them. I think that Mikel Arteta, in his first season of challenging for the league title of Arsenal, I think he bought into the idea that it'll be goals by committee. You look at Odegaard scored 15 league goals that season. Saka scored 14 league goals that season. Martinelli scored 15 league goals that season. And I think they brought into the idea of that's our not front three, but our attacking players going forward in terms of scoring goals. And then they concentrated on bringing in defensive reinforcements. Think about their blockbuster signings. That Declan Rice, a defensive midfielder. A David Raya. Again, I know it's not necessarily as sexy as Declan Rice, but a player that's really come and affected the first team. Arsenal done really well in terms of bringing in defensive pieces, but in terms of offensive pieces, those signings have been offensive. They haven't been good enough. And as a result of that, Arsenal sit where they sit right now. They haven't done enough in terms of reinforcing that attacking line, and now you're relying on Sterling, Trossard and Ethan Nwaneri to try and lead you to the title. It's not happening.